Letter 13 forms real and unreal. When I first came out here, I was so interested in what I saw that I did not question much as to the manner of the seeing. But lately, especially since writing the last letter or two, I have begun to notice a difference between objects that, at a superficial glance, seem to be of much the same substance. For example, I can sometimes see a difference between those things which have existed on earth, unquestionably, such as the forms of men and women, and other things which, while visualized and seemingly palpable, may be and probably are but thought creations. This idea came to me while looking on at the dramas of the heaven country, and it was forced upon me with greater power while making other and recent explorations in that which I have called the pattern world. Later I may be able to distinguish at a glance between these two classes of seeming objects. For example, if I encounter here a being, or what seems a being, and if I am told that it is some famous character in fiction, such as Jean Valjean in Hugo's Les Miserables, I shall have reason to believe that I have seen a thought form of sufficient vitality to stand alone, as a quasi-entity in this world of tenuous matter. So far, I have not encountered any such characters. Of course, unless I were able to hold converse with a being, a form, or saw others do so, I could not positively state that it had an essential existence. Hereafter I shall often put things to the test in this way. If I can talk to a seeming entity, and if it can answer me, I am justified in considering it as a reality. A character in fiction, or any other mental creation, however vivid as a picture, would have no soul, no unit of force, no real self. Whatever comes to me merely as a picture, I shall try to submit to this test. If I see a peculiar form of tree or animal, and can touch and feel it, for the senses here are quite as acute as those of earth, I know that it exists in the subtle matter of this plane. I believe that all the beings whom I have seen here are real, but if I can find one that is not, a being which I cannot feel when I touch it, and which cannot respond to my questions, I shall have a datum for my hypothesis that thought forms of beings, as well as things, may have sufficient cohesion to seem real. It is undoubtedly true that there is no spirit without substance, no substance without spirit, latent or expressed, but a painting of a man may seem at a distance to be a man. Can there exist deliberate thought creations here? Deliberate and purposive creations? I believe so. Such a thought form would probably have to be very intense in order to persist. It seems to me that I had better settle this question to my own satisfaction before talking any more about it. Letter 14, a folio of Paracelsus. The other day I asked my teacher to show me the archives in which those who had lived out here had recorded their observations, if such existed. He said,
"You were a great reader of books when you were on the earth. Come."
We entered a vast building like a library, and I caught my breath in wonder. It was not the architecture of the building which struck me, but the quantities of books and records. There must have been millions of them. I asked the teacher if all the books were here. He smiled and said,
"Are there not enough? You can make your choice."
I asked if the volumes were arranged by subjects.
"There is an arrangement,"
he answered.
"What do you want?"
I said that I should like to see the books in which were written the accounts of explorations which other men had made in this to me still slightly known country. He smiled again, and took from a shelf a thick volume. It was printed in large black type. "Who wrote this book?" I asked.
"There is a signature,"
he replied. I looked at the end and saw the signature. It was that used by Paracelsus. When did he write this?
Soon after he came out. It was written between his Paracelsus life and his next one on earth.
The book which I had opened was a treatise on spirits, human, angelic, and elemental. It began with the definition of a human spirit as a spirit which had had the experience of life in human form, and it defined an elemental spirit as a spirit of more or less developed self-consciousness, which had not yet had that experience. Then the author defined an angel as a spirit of a high order which had not had, and probably would not have in future, such experience in matter. He went on to state that angelic spirits were divided into two sharply defined groups, the celestial and the infernal. The former being those angels who worked towards harmony with the laws of God, the latter being those angels who worked against that harmony. But he said that both these orders of angels were necessary, each to the other's existence, that if all were good, the universe would cease to be. That good itself would cease to be through the failure of its opposite, evil. He said that in the archives of the angelic regions, there were cases on record where a good angel had become bad or a bad angel had become good, but that such cases were of rare occurrence. He then went on to warn his fellow souls who should be sojourning in that realm in which he then wrote, and in which I knew myself also to be, against holding communion with evil spirits. He declared that in the subtler forms of life there were more temptations than in the earth life, that he himself had often been assailed by malignant angels who had urged him to join forces with them, and that their arguments were sometimes extremely plausible. He said that while living on earth he had often had conversations with spirits both good and bad, but that while on earth he had never, so far as he knew, held converse with an angel of a malignant nature. He advised his readers that there was one way to determine whether a being of the subtler world was an angel, or merely a human, or an elemental spirit, and that was by the greater brilliancy of the light which surrounded an angel. He said that both good and bad angels were extremely brilliant, but that there was a difference between them, perceptible at the first glance at their faces, that the eyes of the celestial angels were aflame with love and intellect, while the eyes of the infernal angels were very unpleasant to encounter. He said that it would be possible for an infernal angel to disguise himself to a mortal, so that he might be mistaken for an angel of light, but that it was practically impossible for an angel to disguise his real nature from those souls who were living in their subtle bodies. I will perhaps say more on this subject another night. I must rest now. Letter 15. A Roman Toga. One thing which makes this country so interesting to me is its lack of conventionality. No two persons are dressed in the same way. Or no, I do not mean that exactly, but many are so eccentrically dressed that their appearance gives variety to the whole. My own clothes are, as a rule, similar to those I wore on earth, though I have, as an experiment, when dwelling in thought on one of my long past lives, put on the garments of the period. It is easy to get the clothes one wants here. I do not know how I became possessed of the garments which I wore on coming out, but when I began to take notice of such things, I found myself dressed about as usual. I am not yet sure whether I brought my clothes with me. There are many people here in costumes of the ancient days. I do not infer from this fact that they have been here all those ages. I think they wear such clothes because they like them. As a rule, most persons stay near the place where they lived on earth, but I have been a wanderer from the first. I go rapidly from one country to another. One night or day with you, I may take my rest in America. The next night, I may rest in Paris. I have spent hours of repose on the divan in your sitting room, and you did not know that I was there. I doubt, though, if I could stay for hours in your house when I was myself awake without your sensing my presence. Do not think, however, from what I have just said, that it is necessary for me to rest on the solid matter of your world. Not at all. We can rest on the tenuous substance of our own world. One day, when I had been here only a short time, I saw a woman dressed in a Greek costume and asked her where she got her clothes. She replied that she had made them. I asked her how, and she said,
"Why, first I made a pattern in my mind, and then the thing became a garment."
Did you take every stitch?
Not as I should have done on earth.
I looked closer and saw that the whole garment seemed to be in one piece, and that it was caught on the shoulders by jeweled pins. I asked where she got the jeweled pins, and she said that a friend had given them to her. Then I asked where the friend had got them. She told me that she did not know, but that she would ask him. Soon after that she left me, and I have not seen her since, so the question is still unanswered. I began to experiment to see if I also could make things. It was then that I conceived the idea of wearing a Roman toga, but for the life of me I could not remember what a Roman toga looked like. When next I met the teacher, I told him of my wish to wear a toga of my own making, and he carefully showed me how to create garments such as I desired, to fix the pattern and shape clearly in my mind, to visualize it, and then by power to desire to draw the subtle matter of the thought whirled round the pattern, so as actually to form the garment. Then, I said, the matter of the thought world, as you call it, is not the same kind of matter as that of my body, for instance?
In the last analysis,
He answered,
there is only one kind of matter in both worlds, but there is a great difference in vibration and tenuity.
now the thought substance of which our garments are formed seems to be an extremely tenuous form of matter, while our bodies seem to be pretty solid. We do not feel at all like transparent angels sitting on damp clouds. Were it not for the quickness with which I get over space, I should think sometimes that my body was as solid as ever. I can often see you, and to me you seem tenuous. It is all, I suppose, the old question of adjusting to environment. At first I could not do it, and had some trouble in learning to adjust the amount of energy necessary for each particular action. So little energy is required here to move myself about that. At first, when I started to go a short distance, say, a few yards, I would find myself a mile away. But I am now pretty well adjusted. I must be storing up energy here for a good hard life when I return to the earth again. The hardest work I do now is to come and write through your hand, but you offer less and less resistance as time goes on. In the beginning, it took all my strength. Now it takes only a comparatively small effort. Yet I could not do it long at a time without using your own vitality, and that I will not do. You may have noticed that you are no longer fatigued after the writing, though you used to be at first. But I was speaking of the lack of conventionality out here. Souls hail each other when they want to, without much ceremony. I have seen a few old women who were afraid to talk to a stranger, but probably they had not been here long, and the earth habits still clung to them. Do not think, however, that society here is too free and easy. It is not that. But men and women do not seem to be so afraid of each other as they were on earth.